Hey guys, so today we'll be talking about Law versus Gojo. Now both of these guys have a very unique set of abilities, so it'll be very interesting to discuss just who would win this battle. Now the first thing I'd like to say is that I'm not going to equalize Cursed Energy and Haki. There are a lot of reasons for this, but the main one is that I just don't feel equalization gives you an accurate portrayal of what the characters are actually able to do. And a lot of times it gives one character an unfair advantage over the other. So for example, if I did a full equalization of Cursed Energy and Haki, there would more than likely be no reason to even have this discussion, because Gojo would be the strongest Haki user in the entirety of One Piece. This is because Cursed Energy reserves would therefore mean Haki reserves, and Gojo's raw Cursed Energy reserves, if converted to Haki reserves, should put him to at least a Yonko level. But then it gets even worse, because remember, Gojo's 6 eyes basically grants him maximum efficiency when using his Cursed Energy, so he basically uses 0 of his Cursed Energy when he fights. So Gojo would have raw Haki potential at least to a Yonko level, and his Haki could literally never be exhausted. Law on the other hand gets nothing from this equalization, because even if you were to assume that his room is a domain expansion, it would easily be overwhelmed by Gojo due to the massive difference in Cursed Energy. Even if you were to assume that Law's sword was a cursed tool, just being a cursed tool doesn't really help you against Gojo because most of them can't get past his infinity, and the ones that do, he got rid of. So you'd have to go even further and assume that Law's sword is one of the cursed tools that can get past Gojo's infinity. And at this point, there's just too many concessions here that barely move the needle in favor of Law. So equalization here just really doesn't make any sense for this and other reasons. So we'll be keeping the characters as they are. However, I may extend the usage of either or both of these power systems in ways that logically follow based on what we know. With that said, let's get into it. So let's talk about some characteristics of both of these characters before we get into the actual fight. The first thing I want to talk about is stamina. So in terms of stamina, what we are generally asking is how long can they fight for. Most of Law's fights have been relatively short but very brutal. He has held up well in these fights, but it's unlikely that he could undergo a brutal fight such as the one with Duffy for an extended period of time. Law has admitted that his devil fruit consumes a lot of his stamina, and even though he's getting better at reducing its consumption rate as well as building up his overall stamina, he's still not at the stage where it is negligible. Gojo on the other hand is the absolute opposite. A sorcerer's stamina is somewhat tied to their Cursed Energy reserves. Not only does Gojo have one of the largest Cursed Energy reserves in the entire series, but his 6 eyes also allows him to use his Cursed Energy with maximum efficiency. As I've already said, what this means is that he basically loses none of his Cursed Energy when he fights. Gojo has no problem with stamina, and Law is at a clear disadvantage in this aspect. However, it's likely that this fight would not go on for long enough for stamina to be a deciding factor. The next characteristic to discuss is durability and regenerative capacity. Now when we talk about this, what we are generally asking is, what can they hold on against and to what extent? And it's usually best to assess this with respect to how they respond to direct attacks that hit their body when they are off guard or not defending, which is their intrinsic physical durability, and when they are hit by similar attacks but are on guard or are defending, which is their extrinsic physical durability. So mental durability can be assessed based on pain tolerance, especially in the off-guarded state. We know that Law has a very high pain tolerance because even as a 12-year-old child, in the terminal stage of his incurable disease, he could survive his harsh training regimen from Duffy, as well as ruthless beatings from Virgo. As an adult, we further see where Law had his heart directly crushed multiple times to the point where he lost consciousness, only to recover shortly afterwards. He was even able to continue fighting after countless beatings from Duffy and having his right arm severed. So Law does have a pretty high pain threshold. Gojo also has very high mental durability. We know this because even after being eviscerated across the chest, stabbed through the throat, stabbed multiple times in the legs, and then being stabbed directly in the head, Gojo, who was on the brink of death, was able to not only stay conscious through all of this, but he was also able to look past the pain and focus his mind entirely on developing a new curse technique, which he then proceeded to use to completely heal himself. So it's no doubt that pain tolerance and mental durability is up there for Gojo. As a side note, I think the incredible mental processing power endowed to him by his 6 eyes in part helps him to process and deal with pain and other stimuli much better than other people. Now, as it relates to physical durability, Both Gojo and Law are basically superhumans, but are humans nonetheless. Kid Law has been shown to survive being thrown through 3 or 4 buildings with only a skull laceration. Also, while his heart was being squeezed, he tanked an armament haki bamboo stick to the head without any obvious fractures. He also tanked bullet strings from Duffy and survived the fall of being kicked out of a building, and this was all with his intrinsic physical durability. That means it was done without armament haki. With armament haki, we know physical defense is greatly enhanced to a variable degree based on your proficiency with the haki. We know at a minimum that while using armament haki, you'll be unaffected by most regular piercing and slashing attacks, as well as low-level blunt force and explosive attacks. In terms of blunt force, we know that his body can tank blunt force attack from powerful curses such as Miguel. However, Gojo has survived more than Law, because as I have already mentioned, he has survived evisceration of vital organs of the chest and a stab wound to the head. But this is not because he has a greater intrinsic physical endurance than Law. Both Law and Gojo have superhuman intrinsic physical durability as it relates to blunt force attacks such as punches and falls. However, they both have a regular intrinsic physical durability as it relates to slashing and piercing attacks. That means, for example, they can both be cut by a regular sword in their off-guarded state. Compare this with Kaido, whose body on its own, that is without haki, is strong enough to resist all regular swords and impaling spear attacks, as well as blunt force attacks such as a fall from 10,000 meters and regular punches. It is important to make this distinction because some people think that just because a person can survive mountain level blunt force punches, for example, that they can't be damaged by a piercing or slashing attack that doesn't have mountain level splitting force. That is just not true. Also, as it relates to extrinsic physical durability, Gojo can strengthen his body in a way that is somewhat similar to armament haki using cursed energy. So in this state, he may be able to resist piercing and slashing attacks. Thus, in terms of durability, the important distinction between Law and Gojo is not related to intrinsic or extrinsic physical durability. The important distinction is regenerative capacity. Gojo can regenerate from almost any damage he sustains, even that of damage to multiple vital organs. Law, on the other hand, can only do minor first aid to himself in the heat of battle. So even though we can say that Law and Gojo's physical durability are more or less the same, Law would not have been able to survive the chest evisceration and stab to the head like Gojo due to the difference in their regenerative capacity. Now let's talk about speed. Speed is what I think people get most wrong when scaling and applying, and there's usually 2 reasons for this. Firstly, a lot of people conflate combat movement speed, combat attack speed, reaction speed, travel speed, and teleportation. Secondly, most authors don't actually take into consideration what it would actually mean for their stories if some characters could really move at certain speeds. Thus, trying to scale these characters to these speeds really makes no sense when you do it in the overall context of what actually happens in the anime or manga. So with that said, you won't see me rigorously trying to apply mathematical formulas to get some exact speed X times faster than light or sound. My only concern here is to use some common sense principles to figure out if one character is overwhelmingly faster than the other to the point where it may be a deciding factor. So let's break this down. Firstly, travel time is not that relevant here, so let's put that aside. Secondly, both these characters can seemingly teleport with 0 lag time. This is clearly established for Law when he uses Shambles, but for Gojo it's more of a speculation based on when he was fighting Jogo and stopped mid-fight to go for Itadori, as well as when he moved from the sky to go behind Juzo. Now these could be used as a measure of his combat movement speed. For example, the Battle Wiki uses the Itadori feat as a measure of combat movement speed, to say he's at least massively hypersonic. However, some people say that both of these are definitely teleportation, and some may even argue that they are both measure of travel speed. Most people will at least agree though that at least one of these are likely to be teleportation, so we'll just leave both of them in this category because it really doesn't change much, given that Law can also teleport. So now let's get into the relevant stuff, which are combat movement speed, combat attack speed, and reaction speed. I think it should be easily understood that all high-level combat-oriented pirates in One Piece have at least faster than light reaction speed. The existence of Admiral Kizaru, a man who is literally light, is likely one of the best, if not the best base, to ground any claims of faster than light speeds in any anime. If you can react to any of Kizaru related attacks after they have been fired, then you must by definition have faster than light reaction. Luffy, upon just coming back from his training, was easily able to dodge the Pacifista light beams, which are directly based on Kizaru's devil fruit. Law and every other high level pirate of this caliber should at least scale to this level. Does this mean that only faster than light attacks can hit him? No, of course not. Most attacks, and even most other battles in One Piece and most other anime, do not occur at light or faster than light speeds. A faster than light reaction speed only means that generally, a faster than light attack won't necessarily hit you. But remember, attacks of any speed may hit in a battle depending on what is happening in that battle and how long the battle has been going on. Now, in terms of combat movement and combat attack speed, whether they can keep up with or actively fight at light speed or faster than light speed isn't really important to me here. And that is because neither of them usually fight at that speed, and most of their battles have been resolved below this speed range. So rather than speculate the potential maximum limits of their combat movement and combat attack speed, I find it much more reasonable to assume that the battle would occur at the speed at which they usually fight. And in this instance, we know that both of them usually have intense battles that resolve in the at least hypersonic to massively hypersonic speed range. Law, for example, has been shown to fight with Duffy, who can easily keep up with and actively fight Luffy in second gear and above. And Gojo has been shown to carry out many similar speed feats with ease. These include things such as being too fast for Sukuna, easily avoiding a sonic and explosive attack, avoiding and stopping a blitz from Toji Fushiguro, the same dude who outpaced Dagon, a cursed spirit, who was shown to be faster than Maki, who at the time was able to catch a bullet at point blank range. Gojo was also able to annihilate 1,000 transfigured humans in 299 seconds. So it's no doubt that they can both at least battle at this speed level, and are both likely able to be damaged here as well. Even though we really haven't seen adult Gojo damage, we have seen Law damaged by Duffy, so it's likely that this battle would resolve at least at this level. Now, just to speak a bit about their intelligence and battle prowess, both of these guys are very smart characters who are very accustomed to battles. We know that Law is very good at strategies, even though Luffy usually ruins it, and even so, we've been shown that he can easily adapt. Gojo likewise is an experienced sorcerer and extremely skilled fighter. He's not often in any danger at all due to the nature of his abilities, but he has been shown to clutch in dire moments, such as when he received fatal damage and came up with a healing curse technique on the brink of death, as well as being able to fight 3 special grade curses at once while being in a disadvantaged situation of being surrounded by transfigured humans with civilians actively dying around him and being used against him. Even in this disadvantaged situation, he was still able to keep a cool head and make the best decisions in this fight, even surprising everyone by the fact that even though he was under immense pressure, he was able to instantly come up with and execute the strategy of casting his domain expansion for 0.2 seconds, allowing him to incapacitate everyone for long enough without killing any civilians, granting him enough time to kill all the transfigured humans and flip the battle on its head. Such a strategy was just unheard of and no one expected it. So we can comfortably say that both of these characters have very high battle IQ, and thus this by itself won't be a deciding factor in an unplanned battle like this. So with that said, we've set the background. We know that they can keep up with each other, so speed won't be a deciding factor. We are assuming that this won't be a protracted battle, the stamina won't really come into play either. And we know that their intrinsic and extrinsic physical durability are more or less similar, so the important point of difference as it relates to durability is regenerative capacity, for which Gojo has the advantage. And of course, they both have very high battle IQ, so that won't really sway the tides in an unplanned battle like this. Now, as it relates to the actual battle, the first thing that usually comes to mind is whether Law's Amputate and Shambles is a counter to Gojo's Limitless Infinity. So to answer this question, we need to go a bit deeper into both users' ability. Gojo's Infinity is a curse energy technique whereby Gojo brings forth a potential infinite space in between him and his enemy. This infinity is an automatic technique, but he can also manually control it and decide the space that infinite space is away from him. So for example, if he's touching something, he can include that thing on his side of his infinity, or if he wants to, he can make the infinity skin level. So Gojo has a lot of control over this. Now to understand Law's power, the metaphor of a surgeon in an operating room is best. So his room is the operating theatre and Law is a surgeon with invisible assistants. Amputate is then just him using his sword as a scalpel to cut a patient. The scalpel doesn't necessarily need to touch the patient as in a real surgery, because in this room he can send an invisible cutting force through the air, similar to what most anime swordsmen do. After all, he is an anime swordsman. Now this point is very important because there's a misconception that he cuts at the source, meaning that he bypasses space and the slash's effect just materialize on the patient. That is just not true. A lot of people usually think this because of the seemingly instantaneous nature of it. But this, as I have said before, is just a natural phenomenon of anime swordsmen. Take for example when Zoro was testing out Enma and slashed after Sanji, cutting his cigarette and the side of the cliff instantaneously. Clearly Zoro's slash didn't just bypass space and manifest as a cut in Sanji's cigarette and the cliff. No, it was an invisible cutting force generated by the sword moving through space that led to this. It's just the skill of the swordsman that makes this so swift it seems as if it just manifests. And you'll note that Sanji was able to dodge this splitting force, which is why his cigarette was cut instead of him. I say this just to hammer it even further, that this is a moving force that can even be dodged. There isn't anything we've seen that would suggest that Law's slashes are any different. So with that understood, the answer should now be clear. Because the scalpel's incisional force is moving through space rather than bypassing space, it will never reach Gojo because it has to traverse an infinite amount of space to get to him. It's like the patient is on an operating table, but no matter how much the surgeon presses down his scalpel, it never touches the patient's skin. That is what is happening. Now, even if you want to argue that the incisional force may originate from the blade, but it may not necessarily need to traverse the entire distance from the blade to the patient, that still doesn't matter. Because if you agree that the slash can't materialize inside the body, then it must materialize outside the body some amount of distance away from the skin. Even if this distance is infinitesimally small, it doesn't matter. Because as we've already established, Gojo's infinity can range even to skin level. So it doesn't matter where the slash materializes. As long as it materializes outside the body, it will still have to traverse an infinite distance because even 1% of infinity is still infinity. The way to get past Gojo's infinity is to target the cursed energy that holds it together. Certain cursed tools and domain amplification does just that. However, I don't think that Haki can be used in this way, so Law has no means to negate the infinity. Now let's go a bit further. For the sake of argument, let's assume infinity was down or Law somehow got through it. Gojo does have a possible means of defending against this. Cursed energy has been shown to be way more malleable than Haki in respects to the ways it can be used and to the diversity of techniques that it allows. Mahito is a curse that uses cursed energy to literally shape and manipulate souls, including his own. We also know that you can use cursed energy to physically strengthen your body, and characters like Yuji and Nobara have used cursed energy to attack Mahito's soul directly. So it stands to reason that a sufficiently experienced Jujutsu practitioner should be able to use cursed energy to defend their souls. Sukuna has been shown to be absolutely resistant to Mahito's techniques, but there are a lot of confounding factors such as the overwhelming difference in strength. But still, Gojo, who is the strongest Jujutsu sorcerer currently in existence, and who claims to be able to beat Sukuna at full strength, should be able to use cursed energy to strengthen both his body and soul to resist both the physical and spiritual aspects of Amputate. For this same reason, he should be able to resist Shambles, Mess, and Soul Switch, similar to how Kaido is able to resist these things due to the difference in Haki between him and Law. However, if Law somehow got in contact with Gojo's body, physical attacks like Injection Shock, Counter Shock, Gamma Knife, and Radio Knife will still work because they are physical. But these attacks especially can't get through Infinity. And even if they do, Gojo's regenerative capacity is far superior to Duffy, who was able to tank Law's Radio Knife and repair himself with strings. So these attacks would more than likely not be able to kill Gojo, who, as I've already said, was able to fully regenerate from evisceration and a stab wound to the head. So those are Law's tricks, and Gojo does have an answer for all of them. Law, on the other hand, has no answer for most of Gojo's attacks. Curse Technique Blue can easily attack Law in a similar way to how he uses Tact and Sturban, by destroying and manipulating the environment to his will. It is even superior to Tact and Sturban in that Blue can be used to directly crush an opponent's limbs without Gojo even being in contact with them. Curse Technique Red can also be used like Tact and Sturban, turning the environment into projectiles. It can also be used to directly apply an Almighty Push type force directly to an opponent, and we saw the result of what happened when it was used against Hanami. Splat. Curse Technique Purple is comparable to a Yonko type attack in terms of destructive capacity, and it's peculiar in that it's not just a regular energy based attack. It is literally like a singularity that deletes and erases all matter in its path instantaneously over a large distance. And there is no limit to how many times he can use this technique, and he can likely increase the range of the technique as he sees fit. So if Gojo decides to restrict the range of Purple and not spam it, then Law could dodge this and his other techniques, but not forever. And any one of these techniques could be fatal to Law if it touches. And we still haven't even spoken about the worst of it yet, because let's say that Gojo had absolutely no defense against any of Law's attacks or abilities, and that somehow he couldn't dodge any of them. Law has no answers to Gojo's domain expansion, Immeasurable Void. Gojo can activate Immeasurable Void in the same amount of time or faster than Law can activate Ru. Even if the fight had already begun and he somehow got caught by Amputate, there is still no reason to assume that he couldn't activate Immeasurable Void. And as I said, Law has no response to this. Once Immeasurable Void hits, it's just game over for Law. So in all respects, this fight is overwhelmingly Gojo's. Well, at least for now, because Law is still developing. But anyway, let me know what you guys think of the video in the comments down below, whether you agree or disagree with me and why, or if it is that you feel I left something out. And of course, if you like the video, then like the video and subscribe for more. See you next time, guys.